Hi, it's Steve, and I am here with Laurie Gaddis Barrett. Laurie, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
It is my pleasure. So, I've asked you to speak as a freedom fighter and join our gallery of freedom fighters, believe it or not. And let's start off this way. What does freedom mean to you, and why is it so important that you take a stand for it?
So to me, freedom is the basis, for all the things that I learned when I grew up in public school. It's, freedom of association, freedom to move around the country, freedom to decide what goes into your body, and the freedom to, have an opinion and be able to voice what that opinion is without fear of the government trying to silence you. And so those are some pretty core philosophies. And I think as a matter of civics, we can do a better job teaching those principles in our K through 12 system as it exists today.
Well, why do you feel that way today? Did you feel that way 5 years ago?
Well, I've always been a believer in freedom. So that's definitely part of my core, set of values. But I think sometimes people would, and I describe myself often as one of those COVID moms, right? Where I had a little bit of trust and a little bit of faith in government services. And, when they shut the schools down, I was one of the ones that stayed home and really worked hard to find out more information. But eventually I ran out of Netflix and chill. And, I joke and laugh and say I got all done with the Tiger King documentary, as many people across the country did. And I started watching Capital TV, which is the public access channel for what's going on in our state house here in Rhode Island, our General Assembly. And I happened to be searching for documents or a hearing about critical race theory because I was concerned, while we were at home about some of the lessons that I was hearing about. And I wanted to learn more about the subject. And I came across also a bill regarding comprehensive pleasure-based sex education. And in the bill, if it had passed at that time, it would have affected my own child and in a way that I wasn't comfortable with. So I began my campaign. That's the moment I think when my switch got flipped. And so I reached out to my state representative and my state senator, and I said, I can't let this bill pass. Teach me what I need to know in order to be effective and make sure that the children of Rhode Island are safe from this political ideology as I saw it at that time.
Wow. So you sprung into action to defend your child.
Yes.
Um, have you ever taken a stand on anything prior, or is this your first time getting publicly active?
I think around that same time, or just a little bit previous to that, I had, volunteered, and I live in a very small town in rural Rhode Island, and they had a need for someone to serve on their economic development commission. So it was an appointed thing. I never ran for office, but I suppose depending on how you look at that, that was a political position, and I certainly did want to make an impact in my town. But no, nothing on an education side, and certainly not to the level that I work now, as far as becoming politically engaged.
Tell me about the level you're working at now. Who are your friends, but who are your enemies?
Hmm. So I have a philosophy that if you can't communicate, you can't cooperate. So I have friends on many sides of the aisle. Of course, realistically, I'm pretty right of center. Um, but I believe that there's room to, there's not a lot of difference between a blue dog Democrat, so to speak, and a very moderate Republican. And I think, that spot in the center is where I have the most friends. And to the extent that I would consider anyone an enemy, it wouldn't be personally, it would just be based on policy. And so some of the progressive left ideology is certainly nothing that I can get on board with. Certainly what I would actively advocate against and work hard to defeat and overcome.
Well, you seem very capable of separating the personal from the policy. Um, is this because you have very tough skin?
Possibly, but also I had a mentor in the former House Minority Leader in the state of Rhode Island, where he was beloved. And I asked him one day, like, everybody likes you, and you are so vocal. Like, how do you accomplish that? And he told me that his secret was to go hard on policy and soft on people. And that was advice that I really took to heart and tried to follow and model. Now I'm not perfect, right? I'm pretty sassy sometimes, especially if I'm very passionate about the subject. But I do work towards that goal.
Very admirably so. Do you have any mentors or guides now that give you
I
strength?
do. I do. My state senator, who is the Senate Minority Leader, my state representative, who is the House Minority Leader, I definitely look up to as examples of mentorship. Um, I have other parent advocates, both here in the state of Rhode Island and across the country, that I look up to and seek a guidance and advice from. And I think every person you talk to on the journey, there's a role for everyone to play, and you can learn something from everybody you talk to, whether they're an expert in their field or they're representative of the type of person that you're trying to communicate with. So I always look to communicate effectively with all the people that I talk to. But you can learn anything from anybody, right? I didn't start out knowing as much as I know about education law. And I'm sure that there are people out there that know a lot more about it than I do, at least historically. So again, there's room for everybody. There's a role to play for everybody.
It's a wonderful, wonderful philosophy to take. Do you ever get discouraged?
Sure, absolutely. I think everyone does, and I think that it would be very difficult to to try to convince anybody that this is easy, because it's not. It's very hard to be visible. It's very hard to take a position, and you have to be brave, and courage is contagious. And when I first started, I was afraid to say my real name on Twitter. Um, it was hard. I wanted the work to get done, but I wasn't so sure that my name should be attached to it. And, then I met another parent advocate, and she said to me, listen, nothing bad happens. She said, the worst that happens is that you get people you don't know, whose opinion you don't care about, might say a mean thing, and that's the end of it, and just settle down. And I found that to be, actually pretty good advice. So while I don't use my full name on Twitter now, I'm certainly, my real name is actually attached to my Twitter account, and I don't care. It's fine.
So people being mean is as bad as it's gotten for you.
Um, Yeah. Mean people are going to be mean to anyone. It's not necessarily, and I tell people this. Um, People are going to say mean things. People are going to say mean things if all the time, right? And but there are some concerns, right? So with some of the parents that I talk to, they're like, oh, I don't want to lose my job, or maybe I have a small business and I don't want to lose business from people who might not agree with me politically. So I can't attach my name to this initiative. And while I certainly understand that, I really long for the day where those kinds of concerns don't matter anymore, because I think it's really sad. But, and I tell those people there's a role for you to play, right? You don't have to be visible and taking a public stand, but you can certainly contact your legislature. You can certainly send an email, or a text message, or have a private conversation with somebody that you trust, and encourage them to do the work that you believe in. And so we've been kind of successful with that here in Rhode Island.
So I hear. Can you tell me what do you think is your biggest success so far?
I would say, I'm not sure if it was the biggest success, but it's certainly the one that I'm the most proud of. Rhode Island, as you may know, or your listeners may know, is a pretty blue state. We've got 138 people in our General Assembly, and I think there's 9 Republicans in the House and maybe 4 or 5 in the Senate after the last 2022 election. So it's pretty lonely if you're a red person in a blue state. Um, and it's really hard for a Republican to get a bill passed because of the sheer politics, right? There's a way that a bill should be able to get passed, and then there's the way they do it here in Rhode Island. So with along with my senator, Jessica De La Cruz, she put forth a bill that would close a loophole in Rhode Island law that previously allowed teachers or other people in positions of authority in the school system to have sexual contact with a minor as young as 14 years old. And especially with some of the ideology that we see kind of pushing from the other side, where you're trying to bring in comprehensive pleasure-based sex ed, and we're, in my view, hypersexualizing children at a very young age. In some cases here in Rhode Island, as young as 11 years older, that's what they're trying. And so when I worked with other parent advocates within the state of Rhode Island, and certainly with my own senator and with representatives in the House, we were able to get that bill passed. And to this day, the House sponsor on that is Representative Julie Casimiro, Democrat, and we've become fast friends on children's issues. Now we disagree on nearly everything else, but that's an example of how you can work across the aisle, even with people whose ideology might not completely align with yours, but you can find the thing that somebody agrees with you and work on those things together. But that would be my accomplishment that I'm the most proud of, is helping to get that bill passed.
That is wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It seems to me that somebody that takes your stance and reaches across the aisle and also learns from everybody is very open-minded. Were you born that way, or do you have to work at keeping your mind open?
I definitely have to work that way, right? And I think that when you're the kind of personality, like the more stronger personality, the tough skinned kind of person, typically that would go with, being kind of opinionated on things. And yeah, I develop an opinion, and I typically think I'm right. And it's hard. It's a skill that I had to develop. And I think, but everyone is constantly in a state of personal development or professional development. And I think it's important for everybody. Again, if you can't communicate, you can't cooperate. And if you're a red person in a blue state, you have to be able to cooperate if you're going to get anything done.
You've mentioned a few times the importance of personal development. Um,
Yeah.
it sounds like you're trying to become a certain type of person, um, with a priority being effective communication. What are the other qualities of the type of person that you want to become?
I I'm not sure I understand your I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, you've mentioned in order to be effective in taking in public action, you need to be able to be an effective communicator.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And you're mentioning that you're kind of like a work in progress. You know, that personal development is an ongoing process, and it's always taking place. So one feature of that personal growth is becoming better at communicating with other people.
Yeah.
How else do
Yeah.
you know that you're on track for becoming a better person besides becoming a better communicator? Are there any other qualities that you'd like to have in 5 years?
Um, I don't know that there's a specific set of qualities I'd like to acquire, but there are certainly qualities that I would like to improve. Approachability, um, I think is a thing. Um, but one of the things that I'm learning, and let me just give you an example, or tell a story. When I founded or helped to found this parents group that we have here in Rhode Island, which is Parents United Rhode Island, the group was the group was formed by parents who were really upset about masking in schools. That was the uniting thing that joined all of us. And so in that group, of course, you had, the far right, QAnon, it's a conspiracy, we've got to, file a lawsuit in Nuremberg, or, all that, right? International Criminal Court. And then you had like the really, really far progressive left that were, this is about bodily autonomy, but on that side, somebody who would really be, pro-abortion up to 9 months. And so this is the range of the people that we had to unite. And so I did learn a lot from that experience. I learned that just because I think a particular way, sometimes the way that I communicate or others in the group were communicating with other people in the group, we had to learn to be a little more careful with each other and not assume that we all felt the same way about everything. So the group itself is nonpartisan, and diplomacy is something I think everyone could get better at, but certainly is something that would be a goal of mine. But there was a woman. She's very effective. She taught me a lot actually about the General Assembly. And one of the things that she told us is, like, if you're talking to a progressive left senator and you say the word Constitution, they tune you out because that's not what they're about. And so you have to use, words like bodily autonomy when we're talking about masking, because that's a term that they understand. And so over time, one of the things that I'm learning to do is I'm doing a little bit of playing around with Chat GPT. And often what I do is I'll throw my argument in there and I'll say, this is what I think about this bill and here's why. And then I ask ChatGPT to reframe it as though I were a socialist, or although I were a communist, or although if I were a member of the progressive left, how would I make that same argument? And that gives me the tools that I need to talk to all the different types and segments of the populations of the legislators. And so that's the kind of, I'm not sure that anybody got a value out of that, or a skill, but I think that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. In 5 years, I want that to be more natural. I don't want to have to go to artificial intelligence to tell me what words to
Wow.
use with a progressive lefty. Did that answer your question?
It's remarkable. It does answer the question. You're talking about being multilingual from a political point of view, not from a cultural point of view. You're talking about not knowing Spanish, Russian, and Hungarian, but knowing communist, socialist, and technocratic in terms of the vocabulary they use. Um, are you afraid of losing your core or your center?
Absolutely
In
not.
no?
Absolutely not. So I'll tell you a fun little offshoot of that Chat GPT story that I was just telling you is when our group used to get written about in the press, right? Because one of the things that we did after the whole mask debacle, we wound up filing a lawsuit against the governor and the Rhode Island Department of Health, and that's still ongoing. And then we realized that what we needed to do was kind of take places on the local school committees where we felt, in large part, as a regular parent, you could do a better job than whoever was on there that was kind of fighting you on what you wanted in the various cities and towns. So we had a little initiative where we identified school committees and we worked hard to run for those seats. And we were successful in a lot of cases, and so that was fun. But as part of that, we got written about in the newspaper, and before we worked harder as a group to use language that everyone seemed to understand and not just our little segment of the right of center. We used to be called an alt-right, extreme right group. And now that we've been more careful with our messaging and our press releases and the comments that we make on social media, the press now refers to us as a conservative group. So the language is softening. And so those things that you do, they may seem like small things, but they have a real world impact.
I see the importance of that, and it's remarkable that you're confident that you can still stay true to your values, even though um, the expression of those values is in terms that the other side uses. Um, I think that's
I,
pretty remarkable.
I mean, I really don't see the difference between I have a constitutional right to decide what medical interventions that I want to encounter or incur, and I value bodily autonomy. And so for that reason, I don't want the government to interfere with my bodily autonomy. I think it's expressing the same value. It's just being able to communicate with the person that you're trying to communicate with, right? You don't want to shut them down by using words that they don't like. And so to me, it's just a small language change, but the core value is still the same. I mean, the value is I don't want to wear a mask anywhere, and I don't want my kid to have to wear a mask in school.
I get that. So you're coming to the same point from different directions.
Exactly. All roads lead to the same destination.
All roads lead to the same destination. Let's suppose you are speaking in front of a group of 100 parents and you mentioned the importance of your mentors to you, and somebody
Yeah.
approached you afterward and said, Laurie, I'd like you to be my mentor. I'd like to run a parallel track to you. Um, I think I can learn a lot and eventually become a leader like you. What qualities should that person have to be coachable, to be mentorable,
Fearless.
fearless?
They, yeah. Because if someone is not already doing the types of things that I'm doing, they're going to have to be brave. And I would say fearless. And the other reason that I say that is everybody has a comfort zone, right? We have our the things that we're comfortable with, right? Whether that's, you always order the same thing at that restaurant, or um, you're applying a skill set and you're just happy at that level. But if you want to take something to a new level, whether that is political activity or advocacy or, more of the things that I'm doing, you have to be brave. And they would have to be, fairly tough and be able to take the slings and the arrows because they're going to come. I mean, they're going to come. And you'd have to be resilient, right? You'd have to be able to just let that go. You can't worry what people think because you need to be worried about what's happening with the kids. And if you're worried about what people think about what you're doing, you're probably not going to be as successful as you could be. So fearless, resilient, and eloquent, I think is probably the top three things that I would say matters. Um, like again, going back to that languaging or the messaging, you'd have to be able to communicate, right? And a poorly written email is okay, right? So we don't want to discourage anybody from writing an email. But if you're going to be really super duper effective, you also have to be respected. And that starts with the way that you communicate.
Well said. Let's wrap up this way. I think we can acknowledge that it's going to be a multi-decade, multi-generation campaign to fix the schools, to fix the country. Let's fast forward 100 years from now. What do you want them to say about Laurie? What's your legacy?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. I don't know that I've thought about it because I'm not in this to become famous. I'm in this to be effective.
Not famous.
So,
What should your great 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 children know about you?
oh, I would like for them to talk about me the way that I talk about my great grandmother, right? She was a pioneer for her time. She did amazing things. She didn't let social or cultural norms, I, limit her activity. I mean, she was a school teacher before that was a thing, right? She was born in the late 1800s. She was independent. She ran a business. She was the first postmaster in her tiny town in her state, and she didn't let anybody define her, but she was polite. I mean, people, the manners that the woman had, that which fork to use at the dinner table. We all got training growing up, and I was lucky enough to have her. And
Wow.
so, yeah, those are the qualities that I would like to be remembered by, the way that I remember my great grandmother.
That's wonderful, and it's a good way to wrap things up. I think that you've so successfully conveyed who you are so authentically and so clearly, and it's very inspirational. And I think you're a testimony to the idea that just being yourself is itself an inspiration and encouragement to other people. You don't have to necessarily profess a certain philosophy. Just being you gets the job done. So I want to thank you for being you today. And I want to thank you for agreeing to be interviewed so that people can see you and hear you many times on the website. Laurie, thank you so much for joining us and giving us the gift of hearing your story.
And thank you for your kind words. And again, I've loved the opportunity. And if you're out there and you're watching on a replay, you can do this too. Anyone can do it. And if you're struggling and you want to know how, definitely Steve Coburn has my contact information. We'll help. We'll find you some help. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.